Hello, my name is Jo, and today I am discussing some of the things that I have read on the topic of animal rights. So we will start with the well-known and dreaded topic of factory farming and get it out of the way. Our obligatory nonfiction read about how awful factory farming is Eating Animals by Jonathan Safran Foer. I'm gonna be honest, I haven't read this in a very long time. I read it when I first became a vegetarian, which was over 10 years ago now, and I have always kept it as just kind of a monument to the time in my life that I read it in. I remember it being very impactful at the time. I was a baby vegetarian at the time, and it definitely made me glad reading it that I was a vegetarian. The thing that I particularly liked about it was that he apparently, according to him, did not set out to write a book against eating animals. He was just going into it to write a neutral book about eating animals, but he did kind of, throughout the course of researching and writing the book, fall on the side of being opposed to it. I did feel like it was, though, a very balanced take and not something that put a lot of personal guilt or anything on people who do eat meat. But again, it's been over a decade, so I'm not 100% sure, but I did feel like, you gotta have at least one book that if someone does just want to finally pull back the curtain, this is the one that I read. If you would prefer to get much of the same information from a fictional read, then I would recommend My Year of Meats by Ruth Ozeki. I did just read this last year, and I thought that it was a very good book. So in this story, we are following a Japanese-American filmmaker who has been hired by an American meat company to market meat to Japanese housewives. So they are exporting meat to Japan, but they are finding that meat, particularly beef, is not as big of a deal in Japanese culture, and so Japanese housewives are not buying it. So they're making basically a series of documentaries that are essentially advertisements for beef, particularly. And so our main character kind of initially takes this on just as, I'm desperate for money, this is a job, I'm just going to do it. And then, against her better judgment, probably, her journalistic tendencies come to the front, and she finds that there is quite a story here. There are families behind each of these farms, but yet you can't ignore the horrors that happen at these farms, both to the people who run the farms and the animals, obviously. This is gruesome to some extent, and there are also trigger warnings that have nothing to do with factory farming, so if you are concerned about that, I would look those up. But in general, I do think that this is against factory farming, not necessarily against eating meat. So if you're someone who does kind of maybe want to tip your toe in without being guilted about the idea of eating meat entirely, this might be a good place to start. And our more extreme fictional book on the factory farming front is Tender is the Flesh. I just finished this a couple weeks ago, and it is kind of the book that inspired me to finally make this video. So this book is set in a time in which animals are not safe for humans to consume, and so it is several generations into what is called the transition, which was transitioning from farming animals for meat to farming humans for meat. The population has been told that they cannot survive without meat. It's not totally clear in the book, but people believe, correctly or not, that they need meat to survive and they cannot use animal meat, so they have started to factory farm humans. Now, this book is about a lot of things. It's not just about animals and factory farming. It is also about exploitation of people and all kinds of other topics. But obviously, for the context of animal rights, it really, really explores the ways in which we justify the things that we do to animals, most especially factory farming, but it also talks about animal testing and other ways in which we exploit animals, but particularly for factory farming. The way that the author and the translator use language in this book to distance themselves from what is being done in the factory farms in exactly the same way that we do that now with animals was so accurate and so powerful. This is obviously a very disturbing book, but I think that it keeps you also at quite an emotional distance because of the way that it is trying to make its point. So yeah, if it's something that you think you could handle reading, I really, really recommend it because I think it is incredibly insightful. Next up is animal testing and kind of other forms of exploitation, I guess. And for that, I would recommend The Strange Bird and Dead Astronauts. These were in my favorite books of 2021. Highly recommend them for multiple reasons, but particularly in the realm of animal rights, animal testing, and exploitation of animals, I think that you could apply these books so directly to those topics because they are very directly discussed. So in The Strange Bird, this bird has very specific powers and is incredibly beautiful and odd, and that is exploited by multiple people throughout this book. Everything is always about the ways that the bird can benefit the person who currently has it, never about the bird's rights as an individual creature and the harm and the pain that is being caused to it at all times. Similarly, throughout Dead Astronauts, there is much exploitation of animals, lots of experimentation on creatures. There is one whole character who is centered around their work and experiments on animals. One of my favorite quotes from the book is, "But there would come a terrible and obliterating day when beauty was the only thing that mattered, and it mattered little if the pure part of beauty was blood. And on that day, the globes embedded in the walls hurt to look upon because the price paid for the wonders displayed within was too high. It had become a death cult, under a veneer of what was inevitable and necessary, and anything else was illogical." Our next topic would be kind of the egocentrism of humans and how sentient are animals really. And first up, we have kind of a popular science book called Are We Smart Enough to Know How Smart Animals Are? And I know popular science books often or all of the time have to be taken with a grain of salt, but this is by a researcher in the field of animal cognition, which was apparently considered an oxymoron until like the 1980s. Science considered it ridiculous to think that animals have cognition at all, which is just wild to me to even think about, like, have they ever even had pets? But regardless, he tells stories of all the different ways in which humans have overlooked or willfully ignored the intelligence or skills or whatever of animals throughout history and throughout research, whether that would be attributing clear signs of communication and teamwork and intelligence to instincts, like isn't it amazing that they just instinctually do all these things, or whether that would be testing them based on our senses instead of their senses, like using vision when they use smell, or in the wrong wavelengths, and just things like that. Everything being so incredibly egocentric around human physiology and psychology, and not understanding that that is not the only way to be an intelligent creature. Again, if you'd prefer a fictional option for this same topic, the story Last of the Wolves from the collection On the Origin of Species and Other Stories is an amazing depiction of this exact topic, and I would say it seems pretty clear that this author is drawing from the same research as the nonfiction book option. And on a somewhat similar topic, this short story Caged in Islands of Decolonial Love is about a captive animal and the ways in which her kind of coping mechanisms or ability to rise out of her surroundings are completely misunderstood by people, and it's just a very sad but beautiful tale of what this creature is missing and what she could have had in a free and full life. You can also check out the podcast Species Unite if you are interested. I haven't been listening to this one for a super long time. I would say I've listened to maybe a dozen or so episodes, but I have found it to be very interesting, and it also isn't super judgmental. It does seem to be quite understanding of the fact that not everybody has been, vegan for 30 years and that some people are just trying to do baby steps, but it is primarily about issues of animal rights. So those are my recommendations for where to start reading on animal rights. If you have any recommendations, definitely leave them in the comments and I will check them out, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks!